Hey Merfolk fans, Joe here. Thank you for joining me today. I am here with an exciting replay of a match I had against Bant Eldrazi earlier today. It is a deck that looked really exciting, did a really good job on camera this past weekend at GP Los Angeles, and it has a lot of people talking about it and whether it's going to become one of the big players in Modern in the next few weeks and months. So we can start over here with the opening hand. I have 2 blue sources and a Mutavault for my lands, an AEther Vial and a Harbinger and a Lord of Atlantis for Merfolk, and a Kira Great Glass Spinner. A hand like this, you don't even really have to look at the specific spells very much. You have 3 lands, an AEther Vial, 3 spells. That's a snap keep, very easy. On the opponent's side of things, looks like they have 4 lands, Drowner of Hope and Thought-Knot Seer, both pretty expensive, but with an Ancient Stirrings on turn 1, the opponent won the die roll. They're going to be able to hopefully dig for some early action. So let's see, the opponent chose to keep, and as I mentioned, easy keep from me. So opponent's going to start here with Brushland, tapping it for green mana, going down to 19. Opponent plays Ancient Stirring. He's going to look at the top 5 cards of his library. Reveals a Matter Reshaper, and that'll go to his hand. Passes the turn back to me, and I draw another Island Walk Lord. I'll play Oboro, Palace in the Clouds, and an AEther Vial. Very strong turn 1 from Merfolk. The opponent draws into Reality Smasher, and their hand is starting to look scarier and scarier between 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, and 6-drop. Going to need to push damage as quickly as possible. That Reejerey I just drew is going to potentially help. I'll reveal Lord of Atlantis so that Wanderwine Hub comes in untapped, and go ahead and cast Lord of Atlantis. I knew right away when the opponent played this Brushland that they were on Bant Eldrazi. Eldrazi plays these pain lands because they give them free access to colorless mana and access to some of the colored mana that they need. Very flexible lands for Eldrazi decks, and actually caused a pretty decent spike in the price of these kinds of lands since the Eldrazi decks became popular. Alright, so for his turn, the opponent drew into an Ancient Stirrings. Going to use his 3 mana here to cast Matter Reshaper. I'll untap, and during my upkeep, AEther Vial will go up to 2. And I draw a Cursecatcher for the turn. I'm probably not going to be able to play that guy this turn, but possibly next turn. With access to 2 blue mana, and seeing that the opponent is on Bant Eldrazi, they do play Path to Exile. I have plenty of gas in my hand, and with AEther Vial on the table, I'm going to be able to get my creatures out. So the plan this turn is to put Kira Great Glass Spinner onto the table so that my Merfolk can be protected as they continue to swing turn after turn with Island Walk through the opponent's breeding pool. So the opponent took 3, goes down to 15. They'll untap, and let's see, for the turn they draw another Matter Reshaper. But with access to their 4th mana this turn, they're probably going to go ahead and continue hitting their curve with Thought-Knot Seer. They'll attack with the Matter Reshaper first. Now, we have no creatures that we're going to want to trade with that guy, especially if we take a second and look at Matter Reshaper. For those of you not familiar with him, when he dies, the opponent gets to reveal the top card of his library. Now, it doesn't really matter what that card is. One way or another, the opponent is going to have control of it. If it is a permanent that costs 3 or less, it immediately just goes to the battlefield. So sort of amazing value in those situations. Otherwise, it goes into his hand. So if he reveals something like a Reality Smasher or a Thought-Knot Seer, that costs more than 3 mana, so of course it'll just go to his hand. Still, Matter Reshaper, an amazing card advantage card for the Eldrazi decks. So I'm going to take 3 in combat, go down to 17. Second main phase, the opponent is going to play their 4th land and play Thought-Knot Seer. When he enters the battlefield, I have to reveal my hand, and the opponent can exile something from it. If this guy ever leaves the battlefield, though, I'll get to draw a card. So the opponent here sees the Harbinger and realizes it can bounce something. And as I continue to develop my board with protection from Kira and Island Walk, I think his thought here was that Harbinger is going to slow him down a dangerous amount. In reality, Merrow Reejerey, if I put him in with AEther Vial next turn, is going to give me lethal damage. So poor choice by the opponent there. I don't know if he was going to win this game anyway. But here, as you'll see, I put my AEther Vial up to 3, draw a Vial, but it doesn't matter at this point because these guys are 4s. Mutavault is a 5, so combined is 13, plus Kira in the air is 15 exactly. So I'll activate Mutavault, swing again, as I mentioned, for 4 plus 4 plus 5 is 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 2 is 15. The opponent does the math pretty quickly and says, let's go to game 2. Let's see how that game went. Okay, looking at the opening hands, on my side of things, I have potentially one too many lands, but with Silvergill Adept, I'll be able to draw into hopefully more creatures, and we saw how powerful the Island Walk Lords are against their breeding pools. On their side, we only see one land, so that is an obvious mulligan. So the opponent goes down to 6, and if we look at that 6, he's got 3 lands and a Path to Exile, but currently no white lands. He does have Noble Hierarch, however, which he'll be able to play on turn 1 with Yavimaya Coast, and then through Noble Hierarch have access to white mana for Path to Exile, should he require it in order to deal with one of my creatures. Seems pretty likely. So he's going to keep this one and have a look at the top card, and he chooses to put another another Yavimaya Coast onto the bottom of his library. He'll take 1 from that land, go down to 19, and play the Noble Hierarch. For my turn, I draw into a Merrow Reejerey, which is fantastic. In games where we don't draw AEther Vial in the opening hands, Merrow Reejerey is another great way to accelerate our mana resources, so to speak. AEther Vial is sort of virtual mana that can tick up each turn. Merrow Reejerey can untap lands with each Merfolk, so he's going to give me access to very explosive turns 4 and 5, hopefully. So the opponent has a very aggressive start this game. They play their second land, and we see a turn 2 Matter Reshaper. I hit my 5th land, which is not incredible, but I've got more than enough creatures here to worry about for the next couple of turns. So my draw steps are not particularly critical right now. I'll play Silvergill, revealing Merrow Reejerey because I expect I'll be playing that guy next turn. Don't want to give the opponent any more information than we need to. And we see that the opponent drew into Eldrazi Temple, which is going to make for sort of the dream curve here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a turn 3 Reality Smasher as a 5-drop. The opponent's going to swing for 8. I'm not going to block and trade with this Matter Reshaper. I'm just starting to develop my board, so unfortunately I'm just going to go straight down to 12. Okay, so for my turn, I drew into an island, I believe. So at this point, I have access to 6 lands, more than I need, but then again, I have more creatures than I need at this point. As I mentioned earlier, Merrow Reejerey without AEther Vial is our other source of sort of mana ramp. So if this guy lives through the next turn, I'll be able to play out another island next turn, play out a Reejerey, untap one of my lands, and then I'll get double Reejerey triggers for each of these lords. I'll be able to empty my hand next turn, and all of my lords will be 5/5s, and I'll be able to deal with this guy's creatures. The opponent for his turn draws an Ancient Stirrings. He's going to start off by tapping Yavimaya Coast, going down to 15 to play Ancient Stirrings. I've got nothing to say about that. So he's going to resolve it, and we'll see what card he finds. Fortunately, nothing too powerful. He finds and plays his 4th land in Cavern of Souls, also naming Eldrazi. Opponent's going to swing again for 8, and unfortunately, again, I have no profitable blocks. The opponent's going to tap that white source I mentioned earlier with Noble Hierarch and exile Merrow Reejerey. And we can see the power of Noble Hierarch in, well, Bant decks in general, but in this Eldrazi deck, it helped push out an early Reality Smasher, which is so hard to deal with, and also gives the opponent very important sort of additional access to white mana to be able to resolve its crucial removal spells at moments like this. As I mentioned, if he didn't deal with my Merrow Reejerey right there, I was going to have 4 lords on the table next turn. Reality Smasher, just to show you guys really quickly, when he becomes the target of a spell that I control, he gets to counter that spell unless I discard a card. So it's I have enough lands here that I can pitch, but it's really important to note that Harbinger of the Tides is a great counter to Reality Smasher because Reality Smasher only cares about spells. It doesn't care about abilities. So Harbinger can bounce this guy all day. Unfortunately, I don't have any Harbingers right now. So the opponent pathed my Merrow Reejerey. I got a tapped island. I'm going ahead to my my next turn. I drew another land. At this point, I don't think there's much that I can do. I can play out a Reejerey and a Lord, but that's about it, unfortunately. Now, I think I did make a slight misstep here. I should probably, here with the Reejerey on the table, I should have attacked with the Silvergill Adept for 3 damage, then played the Lord and untapped my Silvergill. Since I have no profitable untaps of lands, like I can only play out 1 Lord this turn, I probably should have attacked for 4 here, for 3, and then untapped the Silvergill as a blocker. As it stood, I just untapped the land, and it's too much pressure, so I can't attack with the Silvergill right now. I'm just trying to stabilize to the best of my ability after the opponent pathed my Merrow Reejerey. Fortunately, we see the opponent draws into another land, and they don't have any gas right now. For whatever reason, the opponent chooses just to get in with the Matter Reshaper. I think he didn't quite realize that the Silvergill was a 4/3, because when I chose to block, he moved forward as if the Matter Reshaper had not been blocked. Had not been killed. But I pointed out to him that that they both die. Maybe I should have stayed quiet because I think he revealed, unfortunately, something a little bit scary with the Drowner of Hope. Coming off the top of the deck, that'll go into his hand, and he'll have enough mana to cast that guy. So he taps 2 temples for 4 mana and the other 2 lands there for the Drowner of Hope, bringing 2 Scions, which he can sacrifice to tap a creature. Just a little bit too much pressure. If that top deck had been something else, I might have been in it. Because I hit a pretty nice top deck in Harbinger of the Tides. Now, I have to think this turn exactly what my sequencing should be. I don't have Island Walk currently, with Master of the Pearl Trident on the table, but no islands on the opponent's side of things. So I'm going to have enough lands to be able to play out my Lord of Atlantis and leave up 4 to attack with the Harbinger. The opponent, however, has too much power on the table, and without Island Walk, I'm not really going to have any profitable attacks here. So I gave it some thought, and chose ultimately to just play the Lord, tapping his Reality Smasher for no reason. Just think about combat for a minute, and ultimately decide that it's just not going to work out in my favor. So the opponent actually let me go to the attack step without tapping down anything with the Scions. Now, sadly, the opponent draws Engineered Explosives. If they were this turn to, I don't know, try to sack these Scions to tap a couple of my creatures and attack, I could, if they attack with their 2 fatties, I could play Harbinger of the Tides at instant speed, bounce one of them, and block the other with the Harbinger of the Tides, and trade with one of them. As it stands, the Engineered Explosives is just a blowout. The opponent takes another life off of Yavimaya Coast to create, I guess, blue mana and green mana to play Engineered Explosives with 2 counters. That'll resolve. I have no counter spells. And the opponent goes ahead and activates that now, making my choices far fewer. They're going to sacrifice a Scion here to tap down my Reejerey and get in for 10 power with the Drowner of Hope and the Reality Smasher. I think about it for a moment, but even if I flash in Harbinger of the Tides, he can just sacrifice him before we go to blocks to not allow me to block. So I thought about not even showing him the Harbinger here, just because he might then look out for the effect next turn. But I don't really mind the opponent knowing about Harbinger of the Tides. Sometimes it causes them to play around it even when I don't have it. So I decided in the end to go ahead and play the Harbinger just to show it to him. Okay, I'll just bounce the Reality Smasher. Before damage, before blocks even, he's going to sacrifice the Scion. I'll have to tap my Harbinger. So that was the end of the second game. That Path to Exile, I think it was on the opponent's 4th turn, was extremely critical to their success in that game. The Noble Hierarch allowing all of that to happen. Otherwise, the opponent had no access the entire game to any white mana. Had my Merrow Reejerey survived, as I showed you guys, I would have had, I think, was it 4? Yeah, 4 5/5 lords on the table. So unfortunately, we didn't get there that game, but we'll see how Game 3 went. Okay, looking at the opening hands. On my side of things, it looks really fantastic, looks really similar to the other hands that I've had so far. I've got 2 blue sources and a Mutavault, and Silvergill draw me into a couple of other cards. Well, I guess one other card. At this point, I've got the Merrow Reejerey and the Harbinger combo in hand. I've got Island Walk with Master of the Pearl Trident. This hand looks excellent. However, on the opponent's side of things, we can see that he has Engineered Explosives in hand, which is going to be able to deal with all of these 2-drops of mine. Let's see how many lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, including, thankfully, a Hallowed Fountain, turning on my Island Walk. Reality Smasher is going to be able to come out as of now on turn 4, still earlier than I'd like, and he'll be able to play a Thought-Knot Seer on turn 3. So it looks like easy keeps for both players. For my turn 1, I'm just going to play an island and pass to the opponent. For their turn, they draw another brush land. So the opponent mistakenly played a Reality Smasher instead of an Eldrazi Temple. It happens sometimes. You grab the wrong card and put it out onto the table. So I knew the opponent had the Reality Smasher. I don't think that changed my play very much. They choose to open with Eldrazi Temple on turn 1. I draw into an island, which is going to be good as a 4th land to play things like Master of Waves. But I'm going this turn to play a Wanderwine Hub, revealing Silvergill Adept, casting Silvergill Adept, and then revealing Merrow Reejerey. As I mentioned in a previous game, you typically want to reveal the Merfolk that you plan on casting next, just because you don't want to reveal any more cards than you need to. I drew off of the Silvergill another Island Walk Lord, or was it a land? I think it was a land, actually. It was. The opponent plays a tapped Hallowed Fountain. It's going to give me access to Island Walk, which is so important in these creature matchups. Okay, that turn I drew into a second Island Walk Lord. So the opponent has some really good cards in these 2 gigantic creatures and Engineered Explosives. However, Merrow Reejerey is a 3-drop, so he diversifies my board presence a little bit, making Engineered Explosives a little bit less effective than if I were just to drop a bunch of 2-drops. Okay, so this turn, the opponent played his Brush land and cast his Thought-Knot Seer. Revealing my hand, again the opponent sees a Harbinger of the Tides, as he did in Game 1. Let's see if he chooses to take it this time. These 2 Island Walk Lords are going to make all of my creatures a lot bigger. However, with Engineered Explosives in hand, he might be feeling pretty comfortable and not be overly threatened by these 2 Masters of the Pearl Trident. Opponent definitely gave it a good amount of thought, and in the end decides to take the Harbinger of the Tides. So that guy's going to get exiled. For my turn, I draw another Harbinger of the Tides. So with Reejerey on the table and another island in hand, I would be able to play out all of this stuff right now. So after giving it a little bit of thought, I do play out that island. Going to go ahead and play out the first Lord, untap a land, play the second Lord, untap a land. Now at this point, I'm able to attack for 9 with Island Walk this turn. And I could have fairly comfortably left the Thought-Knot Seer on the table. He's not going to kill me by himself. And if the opponent wants to play Engineered... I didn't know the opponent had Engineered Explosives, but it was a fairly big blowout at the end of Game 2. And with no real compelling reason to play out this Harbinger, it's possible I should have held him in my hand, choosing instead to play the Mutavault this turn. Just hiding some stuff in my hand that the opponent knows about. He doesn't know about this Harbinger, but I just decide to push it, putting the Harbinger out, bouncing the Thought-Knot Seer, just to take advantage of the Reejerey trigger, get that Thought-Knot Seer off the table and slow down their clock a little bit. So he's going to get bounced, and as I mentioned, I can attack for 9, bringing the opponent down to 8. Now, if he does play Engineered Explosives next turn, I'm going to lose 4 creatures. It's a massive blowout. It's a 4-for-1. but with no creatures on the table, he's going to have to tap out for the Engineered Explosives. I can keep chipping away at damage, at the very least with Merrow Reejerey, and then the following turn with a Mutavault and a Reejerey. The opponent draws into a second Reality Smasher, which they could have chosen to play. They have enough mana for it for sure, but I obviously have lethal on the table. The opponent goes with the Explosives. As I mentioned, I didn't play around it. I probably should have in retrospect, but you know, we all make mistakes sometimes. So I drew into a Lord of Atlantis, which is a really great top deck because it's going to increase my clock. If we think for a second, I could have attacked him down to 6 this turn, and if I continue just to draw lands, the following turn I'm only able to attack for 5. So at the fastest, without drawing into another Lord, I was only looking at a 3-turn clock. It seems pretty slow, but with this Lord, I'm going to have Island Walk and a faster clock. If the opponent doesn't draw removal here, I think it's game, and it looks like he drew into Eldrazi Temple. The reason he needed specifically removal there was, even if he plays creatures, I have access to Island Walk right now, and 2 creatures to attack with. So the opponent scooped it up there. We can see he had some extremely powerful cards in his hand, but there were just, I think, too many Lords that game for him to handle. So I think that Bant Eldrazi is a very cool deck. I really love all these new Eldrazi that came out in Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch, I guess it was. I think that maybe Wizards might have made a mistake forgetting about Eye of Ugin. These guys were obviously extremely overpowered when Eye of Ugin was around, but now with only Eldrazi Temple as their ramp lands, their, I think, what do people call them? I forget, Soul Lands, I guess, because of Soul Ring. They produce 2 mana instead of 1. With only 4 of these in the deck, it feels a lot more fair. But Bant gets to play Noble Hierarch, so they still have ramp effects on top of Eldrazi Temple, and I think as we saw in the second game, they can push out turn 3 Reality Smashers, which is quite frightening. On top of being a 5/5 Trampler with haste, also represents a card disadvantage if we ever try to get rid of him. So yeah, I hope I see more of this deck in the future in Modern. I think that it's very powerful, I think it's very interesting, and as I mentioned, I think these cards are super sweet. So thanks guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please share any comments you might have, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will catch you in the next video. See you later.